my gosh, Andrew, this has been a painful, treacherous, wild journey in which I have failed so many times, and I hope that I can be a voice for people so they don't have to fall as hard as I have.
You were in ministry for a decade. You got your real estate license in 2006, but you didn't become a full-time realtor till a couple years later. Yet in your first year of real estate, you sold 52 homes. Your first couple years as a team, you sold a couple hundred homes, and now you sold over 7,000 homes over the last decade. How did you go from being a minister to selling like 52 homes, 100 homes, and now 7,000?
I didn't want to be the person that just posted about my business. I instead, for 75% of the time, I told stories. The other 25% of the time were advertisements, but I got really good at my advertisements. Not through direct advertising that people want to turn the commercial up, but that the commercial was so fun, it felt like it was still a part of the program. My first year as a realtor, I sold 0 houses. I recognized how difficult it was to really get the rhythm and the momentum. I had a net worth of negative hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now it's just become this unbelievable career calling for me because I'm leading a real estate team. I'm leading a coaching company. Don't build the mega team. The mega team can be disruptive. The road less traveled is to...
So, Eric, you were in ministry for a decade. You got your real estate license in 2006, but you didn't become a full-time realtor till a couple years later. Yet in your first year of real estate, you sold 52 homes. And then your first couple years as a team, you sold a couple hundred homes. And now you've sold over 7,000 homes over the last decade. And first, happy to have you.
Hey man, great to be here. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you here. So everyone can look at that number and they can see the success, but as you said, success creates competition. So, but when we talk about our failures and our shortcomings, it creates compassion and community.
Yeah.
So what were some big turning points in your business? Because how did you go from being a minister to selling like 52 homes, 100 homes, and now 7,000?
Yeah, it's compounded pretty mightily. And Andrew, if your audience isn't a realtor like I am and a realtor like you were, I think that number doesn't mean all that much if you don't understand the industry. The average realtor in the U.S. sells 5 to 8 homes a year. Yeah. And my first year as a realtor when I was part-time, I sold 0 houses. So that was a tough baptism by fire into this industry. And I recognized how difficult it was to really get the rhythm and the momentum to develop your database and to get your market knowledge and to be able to serve people exceedingly well. As it manifested, I sold 52 homes my first year, and that was the exact goal that I had. Is I wanted to sell a house a week, and I wanted to push myself to some upper limits that I didn't think were possible. And so a house a week, looking back, it wasn't near as difficult as I thought it would be. And what I mean by that is I had mounds of relationship capital that I had developed, albeit through social media, through my connections in the community. I live in Fargo, North Dakota, and have lived here my entire life. I worked at a church with 4,000 members, and so I had a lot of recognition from those places. I never intended to use that career as a gift into real estate. It simply was a whole bunch of relationship capital that I was able to monetize and maximize. And so I jumped in and I found really great success to the tune of, I live in a world now that I never dreamt possible. All right. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, 12 years ago is when I went into real estate full time. I had a net worth of probably $0. I had finally gotten back to break even. If you had asked me prior to that, I had a net worth of negative hundreds of thousands of dollars from just stupid financial mistakes that I had made. Then I've just continued to compound and build upon it. And now it's just become this unbelievable career calling for me. I haven't sold a house personally in 9 years outside of a couple here and there because I'm leading a real estate team. I'm leading a coaching company. I'm active and building my brokerage. And so these are all things that I'm doing today. And it's so easy to look at the final product and say, oh man, that's beautiful. Like Andrew, through high school and college, I worked at restaurants. You ever worked in a restaurant before?
Wine bar.
Okay. Those that know the restaurant life are going to like nod fervently through this because what's brought out to the clients, to the customers is usually a beautiful plate of food. And when you go back to the kitchen and you smell the smells and you see the dishwasher area and you see the garbage that's overflowing. Like I worked at a Mexican restaurant for 5 years. And if you can't trust great Mexican food in Fargo, I don't know what you can trust. But nonetheless, like, did you know that the salsa at Mexican restaurants is usually made in a giant garbage can? Now, of course, there's not garbage that's been in it before, right? It's a clean thing, but it is like hundreds of pounds of salsa sitting in a garbage can. So the things that happen behind the scene that actually what it takes to make a beautiful plate of food is a complete mess and is a complete cluster. There's weird smells and people and it's gross. And all of a sudden when the customer or the client gets it, they're like, oh, this is beautiful. And they don't see what it took to make. So I think that your original question says, what kind of messes have happened? And my gosh, Andrew, this has been a painful, treacherous, wild journey in which I have failed so many times. I've stumbled and fumbled. I'm on this like 5-year path where every 5 years I just completely fall flat on my face and I'm like, nothing has ever hurt so bad. I'm coming through my most recent fall as of late, learning 1,000 lessons along the way. And I hope that I can be a voice for people so they don't have to fall as hard as I have.
So I want to double click on that because I think that's important. Like everyone sees the finish line, but most people don't see what it took to get there. And I think that's the biggest secret unlock for most people. And I think you have this knowledge where you could create almost this masterclass, kind of like you have the blueprint, which we could talk about. Mm-hmm. I want to kind of talk about some of the different stages from your point of view, and now also being on the other side and seeing others. So the first stage I kind of want to start at is that agent, that new agent. And because everyone hears when they get into the business, like work your sphere, or all you have to do is get a farm. Like what did you do tactically, or what mindset, like what did it take for you to do those 52 deals? And now that you're coaching people and your team to get there, what does it take from them? And is there a delta between the two?
Well, Andrew, this isn't going to be real estate specific. This is insurance agent and car sales and banking and you name it. Most everybody is in some sort of sales. And if you're going to be great in sales, you have to know where you're going to get your business from. Sometimes you're in an organization in which those fall on your lap. And so we've broken down the 4 legs of the stool. I write about it in the Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint book, and which is really a book that can be used across most any industry to figure out how to grow something great. But nonetheless, in that book, we talk about the 4 legs of the stool. The first is PCSOI, Past Client and Sphere of Influence. And so PCSOI is a really nice opportunity for people to lean in and to say, you know what? These are people who I have relationship with. When I told you, Andrew, I had relationship capital, I had a whole large sphere of influence. Now, how do you serve them? How do you stay in front of them? How do you have language conversations with them that aren't salesy and pushy? Those were nuanced things that I've learned over time. But ultimately, I knew the pond I was fishing in. Second pond that people have is what we affectionately call low-hanging fruit. These are expensive purchased leads. And most industries have leads that you can buy, whether it be through the internet or Zillow or affiliated services where people will take a large portion of that commission that you'll be making. And so low-hanging fruit is a very nuanced area as well. The third is what you were referring to as a farm. long-term nurtures. These are going to be, you can purchase things for long-term nurtures, but oftentimes a farm is a great way to identify that. These are people who you're working on building relationship and rapport so you can eventually have predictable business from. Your goal is to take somebody from being a long-term nurture to a sphere of influence. And that takes some nuance and some touches as well. The fourth piece, and this piece didn't exist well 5 or 10 years ago. I got into the industry in 2006, and this piece wasn't anywhere on the horizon. This is reputation business. And the reputation business I'm speaking of is the idea of your online reputation.
Yep.
Think about this, Andrew. If you're going to go and buy something on Amazon and you want to buy a new pair of headphones, well, you're going to take a look and you're going to say, well, what brands are there that I'm familiar with? So that reputation is obviously preceding itself. But then we usually take a look at the reviews, right? If a familiar brand or even an unfamiliar brand, even though they're the cheapest, if they have a bunch of 1-star reviews, you probably aren't going to put your trust into that.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of consumers are purchasing and making their decisions nowadays, is they're taking a look at online reviews. But the other side of that, this kind of plays into the farm piece, this long-term nurture piece, is the idea of your online reputation. And I'm not just speaking of reviews, and I'm not just speaking of social media. I'm really speaking of YouTube. Right? YouTube is the number 2 search engine in the world behind Google. And it is a space and a place where so many people go and build relationship and rapport with someone who is there as that industry expert. I know that I have received from my coaching channel, I have our Hatch Coaching YouTube page, I've received dozens of clients, of people who have watched my videos and learned what we have taught. And then they'll eventually come around and say, hey, would you be on my podcast? Like, that's how I'm here today, Andrew, right? Is you were a consumer of our teachings for years. You felt like you knew me. You felt like you understood what I stood for. And so without hesitation, you said, I want this guy on my podcast. Right?
Yep.
You were the living, breathing example of the reputation business. So back to your original question. Your original question was, how did I sell 52 houses my first year as a full-time realtor? I only chose to fish in one pond and one pond only. I think that if you chase 2 rabbits, you'll usually catch none of them. And so I chose to go after PCSOI. I wanted that to be my area. I didn't have many past clients, but I had a large sphere of influence. So from there, I said, well, what does my rhythm and cadence need to be in order to help them to raise their hand, or in order for me to build a relationship that would talk about real estate? Because we used to talk about God, and now we're going to talk about real estate. That seems like a really weird, awkward transition.
Yeah.
So in that, I said, well, I need to make sure that they know that I like them. I was in a position where I was on a stage and had a microphone for much of my career in the ministry, right? I was leading groups and leading worship, and so people knew who I was, but they needed to know that I cared about them. And so that meant I saw their social media pages, and I commented, and I direct messaged, and I called them. I actually think that the purpose of social media is to take it offline. And so, Andrew, if I saw that you had a new baby, I'd call you. I wouldn't just say congratulations. If I saw that you had somebody in your life that passed away, I wouldn't post and say, hey, man, my thoughts and prayers are with you. I would call you and say, hey, when can I bring you a casserole or a hot dish? I live in the Midwest, so it's hot dish, but you live in Florida, so it's casserole. Yeah. But nonetheless, I literally had to make sure that people knew how much I cared about them. And so I had a strategy about that. X number of people a day. I was going to pour into them. It was never going to be about real estate. It was just going to be about me loving on them. Now, the next level was I had to make sure that I put myself out there into positions in which people knew I was a realtor. One of the best strategies that I can do is, I'm going to call it the office strategy. And I'm not talking about the office that you work in. I'm talking about the greatest sitcom ever made, The Office. If you ever watched The Office on NBC, it was a 30-minute sitcom, but the actual storytelling was only about 22 minutes. The other 8 minutes were commercials. I didn't want to be the person that just gave commercials. I didn't want to be the person that just posted about my business and I talked about real estate. And I think like one of the worst things that somebody can do is to say, hey, if you're ever looking to buy or sell, go ahead and contact me. Like, ugh, like No, that was just never my approach. And so I instead treated it like The Office treated it. I told stories for 22 of the 30 minutes. For 75% of the time, I told stories. The other 25% of the time, or the remaining 8 minutes, were advertisements. But I got really good at my advertisements because my advertisements, Andrew, felt like my story. They felt like, oh my gosh, Erik is just continuing to tell a story that makes us laugh, or he's highlighting somebody that he cares about, or he's bringing up something quirky and fun. But I'm showcasing that I'm a realtor in the backdrop of that. It was never a hard pitch or a hard sale. It was instead, I needed to be liked. And the best way to be liked is to like somebody else, to make them feel interested. I then needed to tell a story repeatedly, not through direct advertising that people want to turn the commercial off, but that the commercial was so fun, it felt like it was still a part of the program. And so as I did that over time, I had been planting those seeds, right? It wasn't just the 2011, the first year I went full-time into real estate. I had been planting those seeds for years. And now that I was focusing on it as a full-time career, there was a lot more that I was leaning into. I now post on my social platforms, and my social platforms that I lean into are primarily TikTok a little bit, Facebook a lot, Instagram some, YouTube some, but those are the platforms I lean into, and I post a minimum of probably 30 times a week across those platforms. So
A lot.
a lot.
There's a lot to unpack there just
Yeah.
in itself. Some people would be like 30 times a week. Like I post maybe like 2 or 3 times a week.
Did you know that when you post on social media, only about 10% of your audience sees it?
You're lucky if you get 10. Sometimes it's 1% on like Instagram.
It's super low.
It's crazy. So
My strategy, Andrew, is I had to figure out how am I going to do one-to-many. One-to-one is how you convert, but I needed to put myself in one-to-many. I chose not to spend money on advertising and marketing. It felt inauthentic, and I was scared to death because I was all of a sudden living a commission lifestyle instead of having a predictive paycheck. And so I had to make that chance and that choice in which to go one-to-many with my voice, and that was social media for me. It was and still continues to be the greatest feeder for everything that I do.
So you talk about being a hot mess, and like I know someone who's kind of like a hot mess. He's and he would kind of laugh at me saying that. He runs around, he's that belly to belly person. He doesn't really have that one to many. And we kind of talk a lot about it, and I was curious, you talked about like stories and telling stories. Like what stories did you tell on social media, and what stories do you tell, like coach other agents to tell, or like what should other agents tell when you go one to many?
You use the phrase hot mess, and that's really taken from the first TED Talk that I did.
Yeah.
Whenever I say a sentence like that, it always feels like a humble brag, and it probably is. Because I had a chance to do my first TED Talk, I think in 2016, and my second in 2017. But I talked about this idea of how I'm a hot mess, how I don't have it all figured out. And most of the time when bad things happen to us or we do bad things, regardless of when we're in some sort of chaos mode, we tend to get silent. The crux of my hot mess story was the journey that my wife and I took in order to welcome our first kid into the world. My daughter Finley just turned 9 3 days ago, and it's just the most glorious story of God's grace and all these incredible things that have happened in my life. Now,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. When we were battling infertility, we were super quiet about it. It was like this shameful, we didn't want anybody to know that we were going through this. Then there's this ironic thing that our culture tells us, and that is in the time of you actually getting pregnant, the first 12 weeks are usually the most likely to have something go wrong. And so you shouldn't tell anybody until you're into the second trimester. You should stay quiet because this is the hardest time. And that narrative is what the culture of where we live tells us, is when things are hard, we should stay quiet. Self-preservation is detrimental to growth. Nothing grows in the shadows. And I had the courage, and it has come from years and years of being confident in social media and understanding the ministry. It was all modeled by my mom, Betty. My mom, Betty, was my only parent growing up. My dad abandoned our family when I was 2. And so she was my everything. When I was 16 years old, she got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and was given like a 10% chance to live. And she beat it for 5 years. And she ended up dying in 2001. I was 21 years old. I was on my way to being a senior in college. And so my whole world was shaken. But just the week before she died, the pastor tells this story at her funeral. He said, I saw Betty Hatch walking through the grocery store. And this was one of those late May, early June days that we get in North Dakota where the sun is like shining and it's like 64 degrees. And so everybody throws on their tank tops and their short shorts. And you go out and just get some of that much necessary sunshine on your skin. And so there was my mom strolling through the grocery store in her flip-flops and short shorts and tank tops. I mean, not short shorts, Daisy Duke style, right? Betty Hatch was in her 40s. But nonetheless, she was strolling through, grinning from ear to ear. Bald as I am, right? Because she has been in the middle of chemotherapy, so no hair to show. And she's swinging or walking through the aisle, and her urine bag is down by her ankle, swinging back and forth. She cared more about getting the sunshine and experiencing joy than she did hiding her brokenness. She was the quintessential example of being a hot mess and owning it. And we think that our brokenness, we think that our mistakes and our trials are repulsive to people. It's actually our greatest attractant. And so what does it mean to be a person of character? I think it means you don't hide in the shadows. It means that you acknowledge your flaws. What would our political scene look like if people actually owned their mistakes? What would our business worlds look like when people would literally lean in and say, hey, I don't have it all figured out, or I messed up, I need to get better? Like that for me is a refreshing breath of air. And I don't want to be a leader like our politicians. And I don't want to be a leader like I see so many people are in the business world. I want to be true to who I am. And that is, I am broken. I'm a work in progress every single day. And so I put that out there for the world. And that came from my TED Talk. That was demonstrated by my mom. That's now lived out through my relationships and social media. What you see is what you get. It's really exhausting, Andrew, to try to be 2 people.
Yep.
To try to be this person that looks like they have it all together when really you're a bit of a dumpster fire. And people are drawn to the dumpster fire and they're not repulsed by it. That's been my most refreshing of things. And so for folks who aren't living a vulnerable public life, and you don't have to live a public life, but I do think there is strength in letting people in. What I would encourage people to do is to not start with everyone and not to make a social media post to say, here's all the reasons why I suck. Instead, I would find 1 or 2 trusted individuals. I would allow myself to get really vulnerable and say, hey, I'm struggling on this. Would you help me out? The 4 key words that I think are powerful in leadership and life are when you can say, I need your help. Just think about it. When's the last time you asked for serious help from somebody? Most of the time we try to do it ourselves. We think that that's a sign of strength. I think the sign of strength is to say, I don't got this. I need more hands. I need more involvement. And that's for me, the kind of leader I would want to follow is one that doesn't say that they have it all figured out, but instead one that says, I need your help.
Why is it so hard for all of us to be vulnerable? And I don't think you're saying like to go and put on your Facebook, like, for example, like, I'm fat, I'm a failure. Like, it's not necessarily like just to lift your skirt up and show everything type thing. But yeah, why is it so hard? And how can you kind of said how to start, but I'm curious, like, why is it difficult?
Yeah, that's a great question. Brene Brown, one of my favorite authors and speakers, talks about vulnerability a lot. And as she talks about vulnerability, she says that vulnerability is like being naked on stage or in front of people, right? It feels really scary for you, but it looks like confidence to other people. And I'm butchering that quote, I'm sure, but that's the heart of it. Is we are so hesitant on letting people see our true selves because we think that we're not going to be liked. We think that we're not going to be respected and appreciated. But if somebody was walking down the street confidently naked, I'd think they're crazy as hell. But I'd also think that that person has some confidence.
Yeah.
And I think that when you see somebody who is owning the wake that they leave and not hiding from the great and the broken, like that's pretty awesome. But I want to be clear, and this has been a battle for me. Is what we put our identity on, right? I think that our identity that we have in life is not just on the good and it's not just on the bad. I think that some people are in stinking thinking. My 7-year-old Simon is a sweet kid until he's not. And he goes into a stinking thinking mindset sometimes. And when he goes there, he doesn't think that anything is good. He thinks that he's the worst kid in the world if he doesn't win a soccer game, or like he's so hard on himself, and so he takes that brokenness and believes that that's his identity. It's as irresponsible as somebody thinking that they are nothing but the good that they've done. We are a literal blend of good and bad, right and wrong, smooth moves, bumpy moves, and everything in between. We are a beautiful masterpiece of brokenness. And so I think that when you can acknowledge that both those polarities exist, you're going to have a much better chance to be self-aware.
I think some people could say, "Great, Eric, that's easy for you to say. Like you've had 2 TED Talks or 2 books, like you sold 7,000 homes. Easy to be like vulnerable, open, like now." But I also imagine you probably were a little vulnerable throughout the way. And this kind of comes to a conversation I had with another top team leader over in San Francisco. She said there's very few limiting beliefs that we live with, and one of the biggest is feeling like not being enough. Mm-hmm. And that limiting belief holds us back from a lot of things. And I saw I think it was a video today, or maybe it was a podcast recently on that topic. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
So I have my own podcast, and it's of the same heart and vein of what you're doing. So I'm just really grateful that you're out there, because I'm trying to find really talented people that have seemingly arrived, and I want to figure out the mess that it took to get them there. And so we're asking a lot of the same questions, and it's really fun. Today we launched my podcast is called the Redefine Podcast, and so redefining how people treat people. And I assume that's what you were referring to.
Yep,
because
exactly.
In there today, I talked about my daddy issues, right? The feeling of abandonment that I've had, and how I'm really like trying to perform for other people, and your original root of the question said, well, what happens when you haven't arrived yet? What happens when you are that early work in progress? And dang, I am so far from arriving, but I've done some cool things on the journey, right? I'm at like a rest stop right now, looking back, being like, oh, that's great. By the way, there's a book called The Gap and the Gain, which has such a fantastic viewpoint. When most of us live our lives looking at the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And that creates a lot of misery and frustration. The gain is like looking in the rearview mirror, seeing how far you've come, right? The number one feeling in life that leads to joy and satisfaction is the feeling of progression. And so if people are progressing, they're gaining, and that's such a better thing to look at in life. So I digress, but nonetheless, I think that money and success amplify who you are.
Yeah.
So if you have some bad stuff, if you're a selfish, self-serving, egotistical person prior to money and success, you will be amplified, and it will become much more painful for the rest of us. If you are generous and vulnerable, and if you are humble, I think that money will amplify those things. Success will amplify those things. So, yes, I have written 2 books. Yes, I have done a couple of TED Talks. Yes, I have sold 7,000 houses. Yes, I have changed my net worth in such a crazy way, and I'm only beginning the journey still. But if you go back, Andrew, and you go back to who I was prior to all this, I think you're going to see that I've changed a lot. Not in terms of, and some people may disagree on this. I know it's out there, right? Every tall tree gets struck by lightning every once in a while. So I'm unafraid of being a tall tree, and the lightning really sucks. But nonetheless, I think that you would see 20 years ago, I was still a guy, even though I was lost in life and trying to figure out my way. I was a guy who wanted to bring joy to other people. And I was somebody who understood the layers and complexities of my life, and that I wasn't going to hide from the brokenness that I have. And so I was still that same guy. I probably had more hair and less love handles and stayed up later and all those things. But nonetheless, I think that those things that I still am.
Yeah, and what you said kind of reminds me. I don't know if you heard of this 1 in 60 rule of aviation. It's this principle that after every 60 nautical miles, a 1 degree error in heading will result in being off course by 1 mile. So
Wow.
on a short flight, like that small 1 degree is very small. But if you're flying halfway across the world, that 1 degree is exponentially puts you, if you're going to like China, you might end up in like Australia for picture
Yeah.
reference.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
What, because you talked about the gap in the gain and progressing in 1%. I think sometimes it's easy for us to get like stuck in the weeds and keep doing the same thing versus having kind of like I'll just for simplicity call it like a CEO mindset where you are intentionally doing things that move the needle forward. And you talked about sitting in lukewarm porridge sucks, and you were sitting in it for 5 years.
Yeah.
So I was curious, what changed?
So scripture will talk about anything that's lukewarm, you spit out, right? You either want it hot or cold. My real estate career had gone, we had accelerated mightily, right? 2012, I started my team. 2013, my team imploded and I had to start over. 2014, I opened up my own brokerage and we had great success. And then we just built on that and built on that. And so we went from 411 homes to 516 to 592 to 664. Like we built and built and built. And then we just hung in the 600s for the number of transactions we did. And it, like the outside world was like, Erik, you're the best, way to go. You're crushing it. And we were staying the same. Like I was personally progressing, right? In that time, I opened up my coaching company. In that time, I did my first couple TED Talks. I was a new father. I had so many things in my life that were progressing. My team wasn't. And if you as a business owner or somebody in business, I think if you remain the same, you lose. I think that staying the same is actually regression for a lot of things, because every day we should hopefully be learning new knowledge. And with that knowledge should come action and improvement. And don't get me wrong, we were consistently tweaking and making moves, but we had to take what had felt like stagnant, and we had to find a new way in which to do it. And so it was about 2019 when we said, all right, we're gonna start shaping and shaking some things, and we're gonna start trying new. And we have failed miserably on a couple of them, and it's bit me really hard in the butt. I've bet on some leaders that were the wrong leaders to bet on, and I got out too quickly. I gave them the keys to the car, and they crashed it. And that I'm still unwinding myself from. So there have been mistakes made, but I will tell you, the quote that you hear of "you win or you learn" is 100% the truth.
Yeah.
And I haven't lost. I've just learned a whole lot of lessons. And so as a real estate coach, as a guy that gets to have a podcast and I get to be a guest on great shows like this, these learned lessons are a gift, right? Tony Robbins says life is happening for you, not to you. And so whether I have manifested and manufactured all sorts of headaches in my life, or they have just happened to me because the world sometimes doesn't flow the same way we flow, regardless of what has conspired through that, it's happened for me, not to me. It's just my job to figure out how I'm going to use that pain for gain.
So I want to back up a little bit before kind of diving into the little those. There's a lot of high performing salespeople. Like they can get to like 50, like in real estate, for example, just because you're in real estate industry, just for simplicity talking, like 50 homes a year or 75 or 100 homes a year. And then they start a team and then they start to barely grow, or that disconnect from being a high performing salesperson and a high performing leader. What is that gap and how do people cross that?
They are such different skill sets. I think that Realtor Mistake 101 is when you become successful, you abandon the skills that you refined and you think that those will translate into this new job. I'll give you an example. My daughter, Finley, who's 9 years old, is in swimming lessons right now. On her belly, doing the front stroke, doing freestyle, she is strong. She's the strongest kid in her class. On her back, she looks like a baby giraffe flailing in the water. Okay? We make the assumption that, hey, swimming is swimming. Business is business. It's all the same thing. One stroke is the one that she does at our lake. It's the one that she does in the pool. It's the one that she's done at swim lessons for years, and she's gotten really good at it. Putting her on her back has her floundering in the water, and she goes from the top of the class to the bottom of the class very quickly. And it's the same thing that happens when somebody tries to go from being great at sales to great at leadership. Both are business, and those, you think you're in the same pool, but realistically they're very, very different strokes with different breathing, with different rhythms. And the mistake that most people make is that they're trying to do both strokes at once. They're trying to do the freestyle and the backstroke at the same time, because when people move into a leadership role, they're still hanging on to sales a little bit. And if they haven't yet found great leverage for that, they end up giving less to their clients and less to their team. And here's where people really lose. Let's say, Andrew, you are selling 50 homes a year and you're like, I'm going to start leveraging myself out. I understand I need to be a leader. And so I'm going to just concentrate on growing my team. But I also still need to sell houses in order to keep all this afloat.
Yep.
The thing we defer to is what is most natural for us. Think about you stepping into a party and you don't know anybody except for two people. Your first instinct is, well, this party sucks. The second instinct is, I'm going to go to those people that I know because that's where it's comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then maybe I'll venture out and make some new friendships and relationships. Only the real weirdos of the world are the people who are walking around naked anyways, are the ones that are going to go and just strike up conversations with complete strangers. And it's the same to be said in business, is you're going to defer to what is most natural and comfortable for you. And that would be sales. And that means that your team that you're trying to lead is getting less of you. And it's one of the main reasons why so many real estate teams are not only making very little money, but they're also miserable for the team leader and for the team members. It's a broken system that should be done much better.
And I've heard you mention that the system is broken. How can it be fixed?
It's not going to be fixed by regulations. And it's not going to be fixed by rules, and it's not going to be fixed by really large companies. I think any great change happens in a grassroots sort of way. Of course, there's examples where that's been different, but I think it's going to take those aspirational team leaders to choose to go a different path, right? Robert Frost talks about the road less traveled. And those that choose the road less traveled, that's where all the difference is made. And it's like, the reason why I wrote this book, and I'd love to offer it for free for all of your listeners, right? The reason why I wrote the Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint book is because there is a different path to building a team and building a career where you don't need to go the same way everybody else has. Hire a bunch of agents and you hope and you pray that they work. It's an irresponsible business proposition for you as a team leader, and it's setting them up for failure. And so choosing a different path, I can shout it from the podcast and from the mountaintops, but it's going to take somebody feeling like, hey, the old infomercial saying is, there's got to be a better way. It's going to take somebody saying there's got to be a better way to seek out the resources and to understand that there is a better way. The road less traveled is to build a micro team instead of a mega team. The road less traveled is to align people tight to you instead of just hiring a bunch of people and crossing your fingers that they find their way. And so this industry will be best served by those that are willing to go the road less traveled.
So this is coming from the guy who is running a mega team, the ISA guy. And I don't mean to give that as like a stamp or anything. I just mean...
No. It's one of the things we've done exceedingly well.
Yeah. So why have you... First, like, what is that shift, running a micro team instead of mega team? Mm-hmm. And why is that shift important?
So... a mega team I would categorize as most every real estate team that you're going to see. Meaning there's the rainmaker or the team leader. There's probably an admin or two. And then there's a whole bunch of agents. A micro team says, all right, rainmaker, top producer, instead of you going and hiring a whole bunch of people that you're not going to train well enough, that you're going to give your leftovers to, and you're going to hope and pray that they find their way. Instead, let's continue to leverage your business, your production, your clients, your skill set. So you bring on an admin or two and surround you to take off all those minutia killing things. And then instead of hiring an agent that you're throwing to the wolves in an industry where the failure rate is 87% in the first 5 years, instead of throwing that person to the wolves and giving them a couple of at-bats, you bring them alongside in a paid internship. This paid internship is what's called an agent partner or a showing partner. They are the nurse to your doctor. They are literally an extension of you with every way, shape, and form. So it becomes 3 wins, and this is the only win-win-win I know in the industry. Win number 1 is they win, right? They're going to get so many more at-bats, and they're going to get such better training by being close to you as the producer. You don't even have to be an intentional trainer where for 60 minutes a day, you're sitting down saying, come and do this, come and do this, come and do this. Because you don't need to be a teacher. You need to be a great agent that knows to bring somebody along, and you have healthy conversations about the why behind it, right? So they win. Your clients win now because they're getting 2 agents for the price of 1. I think it's like we as realtors, we have our code of ethics, and we have what's called a fiduciary responsibility. That means that in every situation, we need to do what's best for. Can I say with confidence that, Andrew, if you're a brand new agent and I give you, I hand you over to a new buyer, that is honoring my fiduciary responsibility to that buyer?
No.
No, absolutely not. It, in fact, is irresponsible. What it looks like is, hey, Erik's trying to make a whole bunch of extra money by throwing it to this guy, and they'll give him the new guy. So the client hates you because you're the new guy. They're not going to be a return client anyways. It costs you a ton. The new guy doesn't get a great experience because he's just burning the candle from both ends, and it's a really bad thing. But in this showing partner model, remember, the client wins because they're getting 2 for the price of 1 because they still get me, and they get you. Now, I want to win in this too. And if I hire you as a buyer agent, in our industry, it traditionally says, listen, you get 50% of the commission and I get 50% of the commission. Well, the average commission in the United States right now is about 10 grand.
Yeah.
And so if I have 5 quality opportunities that I'm going to give to you, idiot math would tell you, hey, Andrew's going to close all 5 of those. So he's going to get 25 grand and I'm going to get 25 grand. And we're just going to keep on building this. I'm going to hire 20 Andrews. I'm going to make $1 million. Bada bing, bada boom. It's going to be great. That's idiot math. Because Andrew, you're the new agent who doesn't know how to crush. So I can close all 5, but you can probably close 2. And that might be generous. But none the way, you've closed 2. So you're now making 10 grand, but it's going to take you 3, 4, 5, or 6 months to make that money. I'm making 10 grand, not counting the cost that I had for the leads. But how much money did I just lose? Like there's got to be a better way. So if I bring you on as a showing partner, I'm going to treat this as a business. I'm going to pay you a salary. I'm going to pay you $3 grand a month. And then I'm going to pay you maybe a little bit of commission as well. So I'm going to pay you $3,000 a month. And so that's $6,000. And if I pay you a little commission, maybe you're going to make another $2,000. So I'm going to pay you $8,000 total. You have stability in your business. That's a win. The client has two for the price of one. That's a win. You have financial certainty, Andrew. That's a win. I now have $42,000 and you have $8,000. That's a win. And that's actually a win for you because I can't promise you're ever going to make $8,000 of this business. How do 87% of people fail? Because they don't make $8,000 consistently.
Yep.
So you're winning because it's a paid internship. I'm winning because I'm keeping $42,000 in this equation. And I'm delivering better customer service. And I'm not pissing off my clients. And I'm making sure that the next guy up on my team is a trained sniper instead of somebody I just throw to the wolves. See, we have to think about this industry differently. We have to stop setting new agents up for failure. Whose fault is it? It's every team leader's fault. It's every business owner's fault by setting them up for failure. I'm fiery about this. This is one of my favorite topics. I'm glad you asked me about it.
Yeah, I want to dive into it a little bit. So, as a team leader, well, I shouldn't say that. As someone, you just said I should hire one assistant, potentially two assistants, and a showing partner, and I'm going to be paying at least a $3,000 salary for the showing partner, if not more. Yep. The assistant's probably like $3,000 to $4,000, give or take, up or down. Now in my head, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm about to put on potentially upwards of $10K of overhead. That's expensive.
Yeah. So let's break it down because everything for me is a math problem.
Yeah.
All right. And by the way, some of us are saying, well, shoot, I can't afford that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're going to stay stuck where you are if you choose not to. So I think that the trigger for a lot of agents, depending on your market, right? Tampa, your average sales price is what, 500,000 or 600,000?
Yeah, about.
Okay. My average sales price in Fargo, North Dakota, I'm at 318 this year, I think. So literally half of what your average sales price is. I'm really happy for you. The trigger is 24 to 36 transactions that an agent will do on their own until they really need to bring on some leverage. So let's just cut that in the middle. And let's say 30. Is that fair? If an agent's doing 30 transactions in Tampa, Florida, by all means, 30 transactions with an average commission of probably $12,000 in your market is a serious amount of money. That's $420,000.
Yeah,
right?
That's a lot.
Or $360,000. I did my math wrong. It's $360,000. That's a gross. That's not a net, right? Do I believe that if you hire an admin, and do you believe that if you hire an admin, you should be able to sell an extra 15 houses?
Oh, yeah.
Right? If somebody is a 40-hour a week, by the way, I hate hiring part-time people. Part-time people give you less than part-time results. If they're great, you want them for full-time, but they already said they can't do it. Otherwise, they give you a half-hearted effort. Your first move should always be hiring a full-time person. We can have a conversation about VAs, virtual assistants, and that sort in another realm. But nonetheless, if that admin buys you back 20 hours a week of your time, or they're helping you to procure more clients, I with confidence can say you're going to sell 15 more houses. 15 houses at $12,000 commission each is now $180,000. If you pay that admin a $50,000 a year salary, which is a high admin salary, you pay them $50,000, you still get a 3.5 to 1 return on your investment. Would you get a 3.5 return on your investment to make a good business move? Yes or yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You hire a second admin. Do I think now you can sell another 10 houses? But this time it's a virtual assistant. The virtual assistant is going to cost you $1,500 a month. They're going to be $18,000 a year to be a virtual assistant, to do your transaction coordinating and some of your marketing. And at 10 houses, at $12,000 a house, that's $120,000 in commission. So now you just spent 18 to make 120. Would you do that every day? Yes or yes?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So now is where you really ask the question of, like, you have all this money going out, because let's say you're paying for office and you're buying leads and you have this admin, you're spending $10,000 a month on your business, maybe even 20 or 30 in order to bring in this lifestyle. But we now are up to 55 houses a year. 55 houses a year. Let me do my quick math. Times $12,000 is $660,000. So even if you're spending 20 grand a month on all these expenses, and you shouldn't spend 20 grand because you don't need to spend 20 grand to sell that many houses. Not if you're leaning into your relationship capital and building farms and earning reputation over time. But if you spend 20 grand a month, that's $240,000. Meaning from the 660, subtract the 240, and we're now sitting with still $420,000 in your pocket.
Yep.
Should you go and hire a buyer agent? That buyer agent is going to cost you more than it's going to make you, because it's going to cost you time that you don't have. The moment you bring somebody on and you have to give them all that time, that's taken away from your own personal production. We just showed you that you're making $420,000 a year working 40 hours a week, right? Like,
yep.
Gang, that's $200 an hour. Why are you going to go and train somebody and slow them down? Like, it's just bad math. So you're putting them on your payroll. You're adding another $3,000 or $4,000 a month to your payroll. That's no joke, but it's just a math problem. Do I think that if I have somebody opening doors for me and communicating to my clients, and they're an extension of me, and they're doing lead generation as well, and they're doing runner responsibilities for me and all these other things, do I think that I'm going to sell another 10 houses or 15 houses or 20 houses? And every single time I see somebody hire a showing partner and they use them well, they'll sell 15 to 25 houses a year, blindfolded, extra, in addition to. And so that means an extra $180,000 to $300,000 in cash. And it's going to cost you $4,000 a month.
So I have a theory on this. Sales being my first job, I understand the mental wear and tear of being broke and not having a lot of money, literally going up and down between $0 and $100 in the bank account. Mm-hmm. And most of us get into sales because of the upside. And a lot of the times it's because we're backed into a corner financially. And I feel like a lot of the times we carry that weight with us, that corner, where we never want to not have enough. And we're afraid of reverting back to that mean. And that's what I feel like. It's very easy as a salesperson to say, yeah, but I don't want to spend that. And it's the thought of going backwards instead of going forwards.
Yep. So one of the things that I write about in the Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint, as well as I'll say from every microphone I can, is that you should always let the math lead the decisions. And that means you should have at least 4 months of reserves in your bank account. Meaning, if the market is in a tough time, which it is right now, if we're in a season where making money isn't as consistent, we have reserves to dip into. I live in North Dakota, as I've said, and from the months of January, February, and March, my business bleeds money. We'll sell 12 to 15% of the number of homes we'll sell in the year in the first quarter. And we just bleed money because we're in contracts with things, and we have employees and we have mortgages and all those things that we're not willing to just not pay for 3 months. It doesn't make sense. And so I have to have reserves because I know that winter is coming. Game of Thrones tells us winter is coming. And if you're ever going to hire someone, you better have 4 months of reserves. If you need to hire somebody that's going to cost you $4,000 a month, you better have at least $16,000 in the bank. So you don't make emotional short-term decisions based on what happened in the last 30 days. Now, I think everything tells a story, right? There's story behind all the numbers, but the numbers don't lie. And so the way I look at that, Andrew, is to say a 30-day happening we should pay attention to. 60 days of consistency is time to start worrying and planning. 90 days is time to take action. Okay? 30, 60, 90. 30, you pay close attention because, oh man, I usually sell 4 houses a month. I only sold 1. I better pay attention to this. Well, in month 2, if you go ahead and sell 1 house again or 2 houses, it's like, oh crap. What am I going to do if this continues? And what do I need to do to make sure this doesn't continue? So the next 30 days are, I better get really serious. Like from day one, you should always be serious about your lead generation and you should be responsible for your money. But you have to say, listen, if by the end of this, this 90th day, if I haven't sold at least 4 houses in the 3rd month, I gotta cut my admin. Right? We don't make emotional short charge decisions. We allow the narrative to continue and we allow our habits to maturate. I had on my calendar this morning, I woke up and there it said, Jess numbers dive. And I have a coaching client named Jess who has way too many staff members based on the production that her team is currently doing. And so we talked about it 3 months ago. And I put it on my calendar to say, on the 90th day, I'm going to contact you. And we did this exact plan with her. Listen, after 30 days, we're going to look to say, what habits do we need to change? Because we see that it's down. After 60 days, after 90 days. So today was day number 90. And she's got to fire some people. And that sounds aggressive and egregious. When it comes to showing partners, I have the conversation with them immediately. Like, hey, if we don't make any money consistently and this doesn't work out, I have to have you just be an agent. Are you okay with that? Like, I'm not firing you. You're still in my squad. I'm still going to help you to win, but I can't pay your salary anymore. You're going to get a higher split on your stuff. It's going to be great. And every time they're like, yep, I totally get it. When it comes to admin, dude, that's my family. That's people that I love. And the last thing I want to do is to have to drop them. And for 10 years of my career, I never had to let somebody go for my own bad business decisions up until a year ago. And a year ago, we had to start making cuts. I lost a bunch of agents. Remember, I said I bet on some wrong leaders. The market was down. I lost a bunch of agents. We were slow to make changes. We didn't add enough new agents. And all of a sudden, for us to bleed less, we had to let admin go. It's the last move you should make, but you have to have a plan and execute it throughout so you don't have to feel that weight every day.
Yeah, it's not an easy decision to come to.
Oof, it's the worst.
So I want to turn the corner a little bit because I feel like jumping from like 100 to 200 homes a year to like 600 to 700, 800, there's a shift that has to happen. What is that shift?
One of my favorite things is, and I read it years ago and it has forever stuck with me. It's called the rule of 3s and 10s. Okay. The rule of 3s and 10s works like this. When you go from 1 to 3 people in your organization, everything changes. How you operate, how you function, what your time structure looks like, your cadence, your mindset, everything changes. The same thing happens when you go from 3 to 10. And by the way, it might be 9, it might be 11, but it holds true in that same capacity. So when you hit 10 people, oh my gosh, totally different than 3. And how you execute and how you operate changes. Well, that compounds when you go from 10 to 30, 30 to 100, 100 to 300, 300 to 1,000. That's when businesses need to shapeshift themselves. I was talking with a coaching client yesterday who currently has 56 agents on his team. It's a ton of agents.
Yeah.
And he had said, hey, we're having some issues because I don't feel like we're set up in the right structure. And so I asked him about vision of growth, and we talked about who he currently has leading his agents. And I said, Dan, are you currently functioning as a team that's leading 100 people or a team that's leading 30 people? And without hesitation, he goes, oh, we're a team of 30. Like, that's how we're functioning. That's our mindset is we want to deliver that same kind of cadence and that same kind of setup. See, if you're in a small organization, everybody has to row the boat together. Everybody has to be in the exact same cadence. You can't fart without everybody else smelling it and detecting it. So your foundational people matter a whole lot. From there, it becomes success through others, right? My career had me as the top producer for the first number of years, and then it was 2014, and I sold 153 houses myself in 2014. My team sold 411. That was the first year in my career where my team outproduced me. That was the accelerator in which we had to say, how do we start functioning differently? we had to rely on no longer just PCSOI and no longer low-hanging fruit. We had to add in other strategies that were bringing in new dollars. So I think that as you grow, when you hit that 3 or that 10 or that 30 or that 100, you have to re-examine all of those things. Where do you get your leads from? How do you lead your people? How do you bring your people in? Like everything is brought into question because it all reshapes. So it's not an easy like 1, 2, I did these 2 things.
Yeah.
I literally had to view myself when I hit, for me, it was about 14 people. When I hit about 14 people, I recognized, because that's when I was going from selling in the 200s to the 400s and 500s and 600s. So I had to operate totally differently. I got out of production, right? That was a leadership problem. I changed my spend. I went from a guy that was spending $15,000 a month to at my peak, I was spending $120,000 a month when our team was at its biggest, right? Literally 8x'd my dollars spent. That, of course, is a reshaping of everything. You have to make sure that your ISA system is set up, that your admin system is set up, that you're trying to minimize capital and maximize expense, because there's a difference, and I want to be really clear on this. There's a difference between scaling and growing. Some of the mistakes I made is I was really intentional on growing, adding more, spending more so that we could have more. That more was an ego stroke. We sold 1,024 houses in 2021, but my profit margin in that was only 13%. I know some people, I have a friend named Katie in Houston. Katie sells a couple 100 houses a year.
Katie Day.
Yeah, Katie Day. She's a legend. She sells a couple 100 houses a year on her team, and her profit margin is like 40%. How many less headaches does Katie have? How many more loyal, row the boat together team members does Katie have? Because when I had 55 people selling 1,024 houses at a 13% profit margin, the world said you're amazing, but I didn't feel amazing. So you have to be really, really careful on what you're building, how you're building it. And I will again declare this as loud as I can. Most people shouldn't have big teams. Most people should have micro teams once they've mastered their own production. And that's it. You can have a 7-figure life annually with so many less headaches, with working 30 or 40 hours a week. You can literally make $500 an hour with a micro team. It took me the first year I ever made $1 million for my real estate team, and I have some other businesses too that are fruitful, and I'm fortunate for that. First year I ever made $1 million was 2020. I had to sell 866 houses to make $1 million. Katie Day makes almost $1 million a year selling 200 houses. In the famous words of the people at Napoleon Dynamite, they said, "I want that." The couple sitting at the table when they see the thing that Uncle Rico's giving away when they buy the Tupperware, and she just says, "I want that." That's what I want. I want the easier. And I'm here to try to say, take the road less traveled. Don't build the mega team. The mega team can be disruptive and a headache, and it works for a few, but it fails for most.
So you talked about the leadership lessons that you learned this past year, the tough lessons that you had to go through. What changes are you making now, kind of in your structure, your team, like moving forward to kind of have a more fruitful business that doesn't have all those headaches? Are there anything in mind, or?
So we back in March, we joined Place. Place is basically a team for teams. It's ran by Ben Kinney, who is just such a legend in this industry, Chris Suarez, who is such an incredible dude, and Chris Stewart, who serves as president. He's the former CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. So some big players. And I recognize that I spent a lot of my years and a lot of my time building unintentionally for my ego, maybe even intentionally so, that I wanted it to be my name, my thing. I was going to stand alone. I had an independent brokerage. I was going to get as far as I could on my own, and that I was the guy, right? That was the story I told myself. Well, it was a great story until I really needed help, and I looked around and I was all alone. And chapter 1 for my real estate career was solo agent. and that worked out pretty well. Chapter 2 was the guy leading the team, and the guy leading the team worked out pretty well. Chapter 3, which is what I'm unfolding right now, are strategic partnerships. So my partnership with Real, the brokerage that I'm aligned with, is 100% strategic. I'm there to get better. I'm there to give. Yes, I'm there to capitalize on opportunities. I'm there to support my team, but I'm there to get better. And the leadership that they have and the partnership that I get with them is unparalleled. My partnership with Place is of that same accord. I brought in and literally am now sharing the ownership and the responsibility of my team, not only with Place, but my president, Heather Matson, who is just the most tremendous of women. So all of that is that I have now started to recognize that I'm not the guy. Don't get me wrong, Andrew. I've done some cool things, right? I've done what most people haven't done in this industry, but I'm not near as far as I want to be. And I haven't impacted enough lives yet. I haven't done enough cool stuff. I haven't broken the mold well enough. And so everywhere I get at this point in this chapter is about partnerships. The reason why I failed was because of me. I told you I hired some wrong leaders. The key part in that is not the leaders that I hired. The key part is me. I made the decision. I handed off the baton improperly. Me. This is all about how I can get better, and I need to own all that.
You talked about not having ego, and I think this kind of plays into that, and realizing, like, if you look at a lot of, for example, tech, you see all the softwares, like, there's really only very few, being like, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, who saw the company up to its level. Was it hard for you to come to the decision that you're not the guy?
It still is. It still is hard. That's such a good question. Yeah.
Because one, like, for example, I might say, like, could you not become the guy, or is it just not the path that you want to take being the guy? You want to take a different path being the guy?
I'm called to. I'm called on a scale outside of my real estate team. My real estate team is an extension of who I am, but they're manifesting themselves into a new version of it. Like, I don't have grandkids yet. My kids are 9 and 7, so that would be very, very weird. But I'd imagine it's what grandparents struggle with, is they see their kids having kids, and they know that kid is making a mistake with how they're parenting or what they're doing, and they know the pain that's going to be inflicted on both the grandkid and the kid from having to try to find their way. But a great grandparent doesn't jump in and grab the steering wheel. They don't try to take over. They instead give advice when asked, try to support consistently, and I'll be there to help pick up the pieces. And my job, literally, in the first book I wrote, it's called Play for the Person Next to You. It's a servant leadership book. The very first lines in the book, I talk about how I want my life to mean something. And I thought it meant that I wanted to have this incredible autobiography that I would write, that I climbed Kilimanjaro and that I know how to spell Kilimanjaro, right? Like those, I wanted it to be life like I've done all these awesome things. And in talking with a mentor of mine, he said, Eric, I don't know if that seems like it's you. I'm like, okay, yeah, because I just think I'm supposed to say that. And he said, wouldn't it be better to be a chapter in everybody else's books? And I'm like, oh, Mark, that's the thing. That's what I want to do. I want to be a chapter in everybody else's books. But Andrew, if I remain at Hatch Realty, I'm the whole book. Maybe people come and go and I'm chapters in there, but like, can't I be a chapter in Hatch Realty's book? I'm the namesake of it. Sure, that's super cool. I'm still the owner of it. But doesn't it make sense that I'm a chapter? Meaning, I can't be the whole story. I gotta hand it off. Like, the handoff is the hard part, man. I could write another book on just how hard it is to transition leadership from one person to another, because it goes from one style to another. Everybody has their expectations. It's a sloppy, gross mess that I have not perfected by any means. But Hatch Realty has some beautiful chapters, and if I stay there, I'm the bottleneck. and they deserve more than what I'm willing to give them right now, because I feel called to be on your podcast. I feel called to influence this industry. I feel called to continue to write books and to try to shape lives and to help people to have a bit of the goodness that God is offering for us. And so my playing small is not going to serve the world. And there's nothing small about Hatch Realty, but I feel a calling to bigger things.
Yeah. And one thing I didn't want to glaze over is you recognize that every step of the way you need like your board of advisors, you need like a mentor, because it's helped you come to a lot of these like realizations at each point. And I was going to ask you, like, what are you obsessed with right now? Mm-hmm. And is that it?
No, I don't. I think if I'm obsessed with something is I am finding my voice again. Over the last 11 months, 12 months now, 50% of my production left my company. Our coaching business has shrunk 50%. I've had to make layoffs for people. I have no longer bought into the identity that I have good and bad. I've only bought into the identity that I have bad. And it has taken me some truth tellers in my life and some other people to remind me of the greatness that I have as well. I still have the bad. I still have the mistakes. I'm not failing. I'm learning at every turn, right? So we're working on regaining our confidence. So like I'm in therapy and rehab. I'm in therapy with a counselor. I'm in therapy and rehab in my business, and I'm finding my voice again. And my voice is still a voice of leadership. My voice is still a voice of hopeful opportunity met with really, really intentional hard work. So I'm still that guy, but understand that I've questioned who I was because I had the things that didn't work out the way in which I want. Again, you're either winning or you're learning, and I have learned a ton. And to maybe tie all this together, it was March earlier in the year, and my wife and I were on a vacation with a group of friends to the Virgin Islands. We were on a private island in the British Virgin Islands. Like, how bougie is that, Living my best life. But I didn't feel like I was living my best life. I paid for the vacation the year before, so that's how we actually went, because I was in debt hundreds of thousands of dollars just to start that year off. And my team had blown up, and I was busy firing people, and here I am sitting drinking a pina colada poolside in the it just felt gross. And I knew that social media was seeing where I was at. So the Instagram-esque lifestyle of what I was doing had the world believe that everything was okay. And I made a post at the airport of, listen, you just saw paradise, and that's what the outside world sees, but I'm not in paradise right now. I'm going through hell. And I shared just some of the hardships. Andrew, the amount of support and feedback and me too. I wish I had the courage to say what you said. Like you just told hundreds of people reached out to me privately, publicly, didn't matter. Hundreds of people reached out to me. And it was at that time that I recognized that I wasn't alone in this. Like the reason why AA exists is so broken people can have community and they can together try to get better. And if I'm going to be the leader that I want to be, my silence doesn't create that community. My silence allows everybody to think that everything's okay. And so leaders go first. Leaders are the ones that should be speaking up, the most likely to show their brokenness, the most likely to show their mistakes so that other people can flock to it and learn from it. So that's what my focus is right now. That's my North Star, is to get loud with my leadership, not declaring that I have it all figured out, but instead showing all the warts and all. So I'm back to my roots, baby.
Yeah, and kind of ties it all together of talking about like at each level you've probably felt like you're not enough, and then you might have reached a certain point and then something happened and then you're like, oh, see, there I am not enough again, but being able to openly be around other people, it's allowed other people to say, hey, I'm in the same boat as you. And I think that's powerful. That like, I think that's the biggest thing of like masterminds or mentorships. Like you're around other people and you can be open enough to be like, hey, like I have this going on. Like what should I do? Or what should I do next? So my last question to you is, what does world-class leadership mean to you?
That's a good question. I think that world-class leadership is a servant leadership style, meaning we're going to play for the person next to us. Look at me using my book title in that. I think that those of us who are climbing a ladder, we have a hand up, right? Like we're willing to, let me use two examples. Okay. So you're on the ladder. If you have a hand up because you're trying to pull yourself to the next step, it means that your other hand should be underneath trying to help somebody else to come on up, right? If you can picture that, both our hands should be mightily at work there to serve, to pursue our own goals and to help other people. But I also end my book, Play for the Person Next to You, with an analogy, and that is, if you're going to be somebody who wants to do world-class things, if you want to climb to the highest of heights, it's going to take balance, okay? And balance is, imagine you're walking a tightrope between two tall buildings in a major city, right? If you've ever seen anybody walk a tightrope, both their arms are stretched out for balance, but you have to understand what those arms are for. And one of those arms is to serve other people. And that's actually, I think, a pretty natural, easy thing for folks to do, is to serve other people, is to give and to give unequivocally. But the other side is to let people serve you. And that's the hard part. That's the thing that this world needs, is those 4 keywords of I need your help. The willingness to let people mold and shape. I don't want to be surrounded by people that have it all figured out. I want to be surrounded by people that are willing to improve and learn every day. And so I think a world-class leader helps other people out undoubtedly, but even more so, a world-class leader lets other people help them.
That's great. And I just want to commend you for being a leader at so many different levels, serving the real estate industry and everything that you're doing.
I am equal parts student and leader, right? I don't think you can be one without the other.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I talked about I was going to give away my book to your folks, and so here's the action piece. If you want a copy of the Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint, you just need to pay shipping and handling. Find me on Instagram. I'm at Real Erik Hatch. That's Erik with a K, Real Erik Hatch, and you just need to DM me one word, and that is Blueprint. When you do so, the AI will take over, and you'll get instructions on how to get a free copy of the book. Again, Real Erik Hatch, Erik with a K, over on Instagram.
Nice. And which social should they follow you on? Your YouTube or Instagram?
One, both, all of them. I'll just point to Instagram. I think that's where I'm doing a lot of my contributions out there. So Real Erik Hatch over on Instagram.
Awesome. Appreciate having you on. Thanks, Erik.
It was a joy.